welcome to MOOC 11, Session 4. I'm very excited to be answering your questions today. This is Andreas Antonopoulos, and you are participating in the massive open online course for the University of Nicosia's master's degree. Session is about wallets and Bitcoin in practice. I have all of your chats popping up on my screen, so let me know if you can hear me well, if the audio and video is clear. My connection here is a bit poor, so we might have some video problems from time to time, but don't worry, I'm making a backup video just in case, and hopefully the audio is going to be fine. And there's a lot of echo. Yes, unfortunately, that's because of the room I'm in. I can't fix that. A bit choppy. Let me see if I can reduce the quality of the video so that we can get better audio. Does it sound better now that I've reduced the quality of the video? Yes, the room is very small. Everybody hear me okay? Everybody see me okay? This is final check. Let's just make sure everything's okay. It takes about 20 seconds from when I speak until you chat responds, so very good. Okay, we are ready to go. Asks, why do paper wallets behave differently from hardware wallets? Meaning that if we send a portion of the balance to some other wallet, the remaining balance directly is lost. Thus, we need to send the remaining balance to another address. That's a really great question, Wenjo. So the reason paper wallets are different from hardware wallets is because hardware wallets are built on so-called hierarchical deterministic wallets, or HD wallets, where paper wallets are a private key and one public key. A hierarchical deterministic wallet upon a seed is usually backed up as a set of 12 to 24 English words. And this seed is used to generate an enormous number of keys. In fact, it can generate for each user at each account level more than 2 billion private keys in sequence, and these can all be generated from the same seed. Not only does this wallet generate 2 billion private keys for receiving, it also generates another 2 billion private keys in parallel for change addresses. So the wallet, the hardware wallet, or any hierarchical deterministic wallet, even if it's a software wallet or mobile wallet, any wallet that you are likely backing up as 12 to 24 English words is a hierarchical deterministic wallet. It will generate a new address for every transaction you do. It will also generate a new change address for every transaction you do. And it can generate billions of these addresses all from a single seed without any problems whatsoever. And that's the fundamental difference, because a paper wallet, on the other hand, has one key which generates one address. And what that means is that when you spend from a paper wallet, some strange things can happen. And the other big difference, of course, is a paper wallet only exists on paper. A hardware wallet has the opportunity to be backed up as a mnemonic phrase, and it has a very specific process for importing that mnemonic phrase. And this process is defined in BIP 39, the Bitcoin Improvement Proposal 39. Hardware wallet imports the private key, imports the seed in such a way that it can regenerate all of the keys and addresses. A paper wallet, on the other hand, if it is used to spend, if you decide to make the paper wallet hot in order to make a transaction, you can import it a number of different ways into a software wallet to actually spend it. Some wallets will import it as a private key. And if you import it as a private key, what that means is that your software wallet will spend directly from the private key that's on the paper wallet. And you've got to consider what happens to change. Now, theoretically, all wallets should be smart enough to notice that when you've imported a private key from an external source, the change should go back to that private key so as to ensure that there's no problems. However, most wallets don't do this. In fact, if you import a private key from an external source, most wallets assume that you are no longer using a different address that is managed by the software wallet, not a wallet. This is a lot of people don't understand that this is happening because they don't know it's being generated from a transaction. So what they do is they download a software phone, they use it to import their paper wallet, spend a small amount, and then they're finished. They put the paper wallet back in a safe, assuming like this. However, watch it. There's no money on the paper wallet because the rest of the money went into a change address. And that change address was generated by the software wallet and is address. As a result, the paper wallet is now empty. The software wallet that contained the change address has now been deleted, and the money has been lost. And this has happened numerous times. Wallets is that the user experience is counterintuitive. If you know exactly what you're doing with a paper wallet and you use it correctly, then you can make a paper wallet work for you. But the problem is that for 99% of people who do not have the technical expertise to understand how the UTXO set works, how change addresses work, how paper wallets work, how wallet import works, how transactions work, paper wallets end up being very dangerous. They're a cheap and easy way to do cold storage security, but they have a lot of associated risks. They require you to set up a secured computer in order to generate them and to set up a secured printer in order to print them out, all of which introduces risks that most users can't handle. By comparison, a hardware wallet has a user experience that is intuitive, that 99% of users can manage very securely, where a paper backup of the mnemonic seed is sufficient for cold storage, and there is no chance of losing money due to a change address. As a result, for 99% of users, hardware wallets are a far, far superior solution to paper wallets. Yet people keep paper wallets. So if you're to do this, please be very, very careful. Make sure you understand in every transaction where the if, which is when you or assume any money on it. All right, we seem to have had some audio problems there. Let me wait a bit and see if it's improved. All right. Do I need to repeat this question? We have some connectivity issues. Let me know if I need to repeat the last answer or if you were able to hear it well enough. Don't need to repeat. OK, everybody understood what I was talking about. All right, well, I'll try to continue. We have some bandwidth issues. I'm on Wi-Fi. And I will be posting the backup video, which has very high quality audio and video for you after this. I apologize. You see, I am currently located in the developing nation of the state of California, where due to monopoly control of telecoms, cable modems in the richest country in the world have shitty bandwidth. So there you go. Let me continue. Solomon asks, among the various Bitcoin clients and wallets, which of them is top-notch for coin storage and transactions, which one can have and maintain? Solomon, honestly, I have been changing Bitcoin wallets on average once every 6 months. And part of the reason for that is because while there's a lot of development in the cryptocurrency wallets are often not maintained long-term. Many of the companies that make wallets fail to develop sufficiently robust business models, and they either go out of business or they stop maintaining the wallet and get distracted by other features like trying to do ICOs or trying to build various capabilities out wallet. Maintaining a wallet in crypto is very, very difficult. The space is constantly changing, and wallet developers need to constantly keep moving along with the standards. And that requires funding. And so far, I found that many of the wallets are not keeping up. I do use a number of mobile and desktop wallets, but for the most part, I use a combination of hardware wallets plus desktop software wallets and mobile wallets that work with these hardware wallets. So keep in mind that what I use to store my keys on and to sign transactions is almost always a hardware wallet. I do have a mobile wallet with just a tiny amount of petty cash, like about $100, that I use for doing transactions where I'm out and about. But really, most of my crypto is on hardware wallets that I keep separately. And I access these hardware wallets through a variety of desktop and mobile software wallets. So think about where you store keys and sign transactions, hardware wallets, as separate from the software you use to construct transactions and sync with the blockchain, which could either be a full node software like Bitcoin Core, or could be any one of the highly capable software wallets. I really quite like Electrum as a desktop wallet, but your mileage may vary. Christina asks, regarding desktop wallets and storing funds, what if your hard drive computer fails? This is a great question, Christina. And again, as I mentioned in the previous answer, I make a very big distinction between the software I use to construct transactions and sync with the blockchain, which is called a wallet, and the device I use to store keys and sign transactions, which is also called a wallet. So that's a bit confusing. But I use hardware wallets to store my keys and to sign transactions because that gives me the high paper backups of the mnemonic phrases in order to estimate. That means I don't trust the software that's running on my desktop. In fact, I don't trust my desktop at all to be secure. I always assume that both my mobile smartphone and my laptop have already been compromised. I don't trust these devices. I assume that they've been compromised in such a way that any information stored on them can be accessed, keys for Bitcoin wallets can be accessed, et cetera, et cetera. So I use hardware devices for second-factor authentication, for signing Bitcoin transactions and things like that, so that I don't rely on the security of my laptop and desktop devices and mobile devices in order to protect me from loss. Essentially, I don't put keys on online devices, ever. All of my keys are on offline devices, with the slight exception of a mobile wallet I use for about $100 worth of spending that I keep on my smartphone. So what if your hard drive computer fails? It doesn't matter. There are no keys on it. In fact, nothing of importance is ever stored on my laptop that I don't have encrypted backups elsewhere, that isn't stored in multiple locations, and that I cannot recover. So if I lose my mobile device, or if I lose my laptop, or if it's damaged in any way, I can recover. In the case of my cryptocurrency keys, I have multiple copies of mnemonic phrases that I can recover onto other devices, including for the petty cash $100 that I have on my mobile smartphone. I have a backup of that mnemonic phrase too. Even though it's not a lot of money, it wasn't hard to do. And therefore, if I lose these devices, I can recover from the seeds. In fact, when I upgrade my mobile phone or upgrade my laptop every 2 or 3 years, I don't copy the information over. I use the opportunity to do a recovery exercise where I rebuild all of the data on my laptop and my mobile phone from backups, ensuring that the backups are working. I still have the old laptop and the old phone, so if the backups aren't working, now's a good time to find out. And that way I can test my backups when this happens. Let me check in with the chat room, see how things are going, have a sip of coffee. All right, I see there's some follow-up conversation happening in the chat room. One thing I would like to point out, a few people will tell you that one way to store backups of keys is to use encrypted drives, encrypted thumb drives, password managers such as KeePass or other online encrypted mechanisms. This is not a good idea. There's a reason it's not a good idea. First of all, if you do backup on an encrypted drive, on Google Drive or an encrypted archive in an encrypted file or using TrueCrypt or something like that, or if you backup using a password manager, what you're doing is, one, you're creating an online copy of your keys. It is encrypted, but that encryption and its security depends on when that software decrypted in order to access your keys on a laptop. If that laptop has been compromised, then you've exposed your keys and lost your money. Secondly, the process of encrypting and decrypting these files happens on said laptops, which again, if they're being compromised, you lose money. Finally, if you do these encryptions, you still have the problem of how do you back up that password so that you don't lose the password or encryption key that secures that encryption. So essentially, you've just recreated the problem of backup. You've just pushed it one step further. Instead of backing up your crypto keys, you're now backing up your encryption keys for your cryptocurrency encrypted files. And again, you have to back those up. And what form do those take? Well, the best form of a backup for cryptocurrency keys is a 12 to 24 mnemonic phrase. If you are concerned, you can use an additional you to remember, record, and recall phrases like 24 English words that you write down on paper in your own handwriting and put in a secure location than trying to, for example, back up an alphanumeric password of arbitrary length that you may or may not have generated with sufficient entropy. There are so many pitfalls in trying to roll your own do security in a way that is not compliant with the standard, because there are many risks that you may not be aware of. So be careful when you hear about suggestions like this. Do not back up your keys online. Do not use encryption to back up your keys online. use the recommended mechanism. In the case of hierarchical deterministic wallets, that is to write down the 24 words. Do not cut them up into separate pieces. Do not store them in pieces. Do not try to hide them in a fancy way, encrypt them, obfuscate them, hide one in each page of a book or something like that. Write the 24 words in sequence in one place and store them. Then make another copy in another place. If you're concerned about the physical security of your environment and you think someone might be able to access these, then use a passphrase, write that down too, and store it in another location separate to where you store your seed. But that's excessive. In 99% of the scenarios that most of us face, the greatest risk is risk of loss due to computer hardware failure, due to natural disaster, flood, fire, etc., or just accidental loss and damage to your backups. Therefore, the best thing you can do, the best balances your security and risk against theft versus your security against accidental loss, is to follow the instructions of standards like BIP39 and make a paper backup of the 24 words in your own home. That is sufficient for 99% of the users of cryptocurrency. I'm very sorry, we're having some audio problems still. I'm going to further reduce the video quality to see if that helps. Continuing. Ian asks, what about the new Bluetooth-enabled wallet? And mentions one of the hardware wallet manufacturers that has a Bluetooth capability. In fact, there are a number of hardware wallets that have various forms of connectivity other than just plugging in through USB. I haven't studied the security of such wallets. However, I would be personally concerned about storing my funds on a device that has wireless connectivity. Wireless protocols are very rich in terms of their features and have been found to contain many bugs in the past. And also, just plugged it into. So that increases the exposure and attack surface of a hardware wallet. That doesn't mean it's not secure. It just means that I would not necessarily trust that particular type of hardware wallet, one that has Wi-Fi or Bluetooth connectivity in addition to USB, for cold storage. I might trust it for a warm wallet for having most of my spending money. I wouldn't trust it for the very important cold storage where I might have my savings account, if you like. How's the audio now? The video to ridiculous levels. Audio. Okay. Stephen asks, is there a risk that someone, such as the developer of the wallet application, can access the private key and therefore steal the cryptocurrency stored on a mobile wallet? Steve, absolutely, yes. And this has happened numerous times. Not only have we seen a number of rogue mobile wallets being introduced on different platforms, we've seen this happen repeatedly. So, for example, people will upload fake versions of popular mobile wallets onto application stores such as Google Play or iTunes, and then users will inadvertently download the fake one instead of the real one. We've also seen a couple of occasions where an account has been compromised and an update to a real wallet or other application has been uploaded that contains Trojan software that compromises a mobile or desktop computer and steals cryptocurrency keys. And of course, the developer themselves may do this, although, of course, the developers of most mobile wallets are interested in building a good product rather than a Trojan horse. So they would get caught pretty soon. Many of the reliable wallets have been around for quite a while. So it's important that you're very careful when installing software on any device that has cryptocurrency keys on it, to be very, very careful what software you install, that you're very, very sure that that software is good, and that you minimize your exposure to attacks. For example, the browser I use on my desktop in order to do cryptocurrency transactions, even though I'm using a hardware wallet at the time, is a different browser than the one I use for daily browsing on the web. And it has only one or two extensions, mostly security extensions and plugins in the browser that block scripts and things like that in order to harden that browser. And the reason I do that is because while my keys are secure on a hardware wallet, I'm still concerned about the possibility of a Trojan or malware system compromising my clipboard and changing an address without me noticing. And of course, if I pay attention to my hardware wallet and I compare the address I see on the screen of my hardware wallet that I can trust, I will probably notice that because I always check. But to be careful, I use a different browser for one function than the other. And I don't install extensions willy-nilly on my browser. I don't install applications willy-nilly on my phone because I'm always careful because of the possibility of compromised software, whether by the cryptocurrency wallet developers, which is unlikely but still possible, or more likely the developers of another application that has access to the operating system or that pretends to be your mobile wallet. Again, this is why hardware wallets exist. This is why we keep the keys separate from the software that creates and signs transactions. All right, so the audio is a bit better. Let me have a tiny bit more coffee and we'll continue. It is really quite early in the morning here. Jan asks, do you think there is a problem with Bitcoin to be used as a currency or store of value, since it can be easily destroyed by losing the private keys? Could it be a good idea to make a rule that Bitcoin that hasn't moved in 50 or 100 years is redistributed to miners again? Okay, it's a two-part question, so let's look at the first part. Do I think that it is a problem for Bitcoin to be used either as a medium of exchange, currency, or as a store of value if Bitcoin keys can be lost and therefore the Bitcoin can be lost as well? No, I don't think it's a problem. And the reason I don't think it's a problem is because the loss of keys and the loss of Bitcoin from circulation simply acts to reduce the inflation rate of the currency by removing currency from circulation at the same time that currency is being added through mining. So it reduces the inflation rate. At some point, of course, the inflation rate goes to zero, and thereby any keys that are lost will cause deflation. But Bitcoin as a cryptocurrency is already deflationary, so it becomes a bit more deflationary through the loss of keys, which increases the value of all of the cryptocurrency held by everyone else. When someone loses their keys, let's say I lose the keys to 100 Bitcoin. Let's hope not. That's a lot of money. But let's say I lose the keys to 100 Bitcoin. What happens to the Bitcoin economy as a whole? Effectively, there's 100 Bitcoin less, which means that the economic activity of the entire Bitcoin economy is now divided into a smaller amount of Bitcoins, and therefore that smaller amount of Bitcoin has more value. That's it. Effectively, in pure economic terms, I have given a gift of 100 Bitcoin to everyone. The value of my 100 Bitcoin has been redistributed by increasing the value of everybody's Bitcoin by the same proportion. So essentially, every time someone loses keys, it's like they're gifting that Bitcoin to everybody who still has their keys by increasing its value. Also, there's an interesting effect that happens there, because as the value of the Bitcoin increases because of losses, that creates the right incentives for people to be more careful with their keys, as what they hold has more value. But the bottom line is it doesn't matter. Think of Bitcoin, the currency, as a unit of measurement. If I measure your height in inches versus your height in centimeters, I'll get two different numbers. Has your height changed? No. The unit of measurement changed, so I got a different number. So the same thing applies to currency, meaning that if I take the size of the economy and I divide it by 21 million Bitcoin, or I divide it by 1 million Bitcoin, I'll get two different results. Has the size of the economy changed? No. What will change is the value of each Bitcoin, because I'm putting more economy into a smaller amount of Bitcoin. So the value of Bitcoin will increase, but it's just a unit of measurement. You know, the value isn't in the Bitcoin. The value is in the economy. Bitcoin as a currency is a unit that measures the value of the economy. If you think of it as a unit of measurement, it makes sense. If you change the unit of measurement, it doesn't change what you're measuring. And so we can lose all of the Bitcoin. In fact, you could go down to having one Bitcoin being the only one left, and the entire world's economy in one Bitcoin. What you would need at that point is smaller units than Satoshis. You'd have to go and subdivide a Satoshi into smaller and smaller units in order to have enough granularity in your measurement. But other than that, nothing changes. And of course, we can make changes to the protocol to introduce smaller units like milli-Satoshis. In fact, we already see milli-Satoshis being implemented in the Lightning Network. So it isn't a problem if we lose keys. Now, the second part of your question is also interesting. Would it be a good idea to make a rule that hasn't moved 100 years is redistributed to miners again? Well, that might be a good rule. I would guess that no one would agree to that rule. And I, as a Bitcoin owner myself, would not agree to that rule. And the reason I wouldn't agree to that rule is for two reasons. One, setting any arbitrary deadline, 50 years to redistribute to my funds if I haven't moved them, means that I have to then think about that in terms of inheritance planning or long-term cold storage. And 50 years is within the lifetime of a person. If you make it 100 years, what you're doing is you're applying an economic impact. First of all, you will bring back into circulation Bitcoin that hasn't been moved. And this may have a significant impact on the economy in the future. Imagine if suddenly a lot of Bitcoin that hasn't been moved for the same period of time comes back into the economy. Well, that will have an inflationary effect. Not only that, but who do you redistribute it to? If you redistribute it to the miners, you're giving them incentive to break the rules, as well as you're essentially doing economic redistribution to a narrow group of people who are participants in the economy. Why not give it to everyone? And then all of these political and economic questions come up. The simple answer is that we don't need to do any of that. One of the things that we have to realize is that the cryptographic keys and the cryptographic algorithms used in Bitcoin do not last forever, meaning that at some point, elliptic curve digital signature and perhaps even the SHA-256 algorithm will be obsolete. Maybe in 10 years, maybe in 20 years, certainly less than 50 years, these cryptographic algorithms will no longer be strong enough to protect the ownership of coins that haven't been switched over to a stronger cryptographic algorithm, meaning that all Bitcoin needs to be recycled from time to time into better cryptographic algorithms, perhaps due to the development of quantum computing, perhaps due to the development of mathematics in the area of the discrete logarithm problem, or some other development that we don't know about yet. So all cryptographic systems have an end life. They have an expiry date. We don't know what that expiry date is, but we know they don't last forever. And whether we like it or not, at some point, if keys haven't been handled by their owners and the cryptographic algorithm that covers them becomes weak, people will be able to break those keys and retrieve those coins. Interestingly enough, that's a better policy than giving it to the miners, because what it does is it gives an economic incentive to have systems that break keys and to test the security of the system in such a way that the people who get the money are the people who put the effort into breaking the keys with their brand new quantum computers or whatever. So it creates a bounty, essentially, for testing the security of the system, and it rewards the people who exercise that bounty. So essentially, that's already going to happen. Some great questions in the chat room, but unfortunately, if you don't ask your questions directly during the conversation, I can't answer them in the chat room because we don't have enough time. But if we do have time at the end of this session, I will try to answer some of the questions, especially about inflation and deflation. It's best if you ask the questions during the week so that they can be curated and added to the forums, and you can have conversations about them with your fellow students. You not really at the last minute at the chat room. Sifis asks, as a normal user, is it important for me to verify transactions by downloading the entire ledger, the blockchain of Bitcoin? And what are the advantages to this? Well, that's a good question, Sifis. And it really depends on what you're trying to do. I do transactions in often. I use them to pay. In fact, I earn Bitcoin. I both get paid in Bitcoin and I pay others in Bitcoin for their services and products. Now, in my specific scenario, I can tell you that I often have a very simple question to answer, and that question is, have I been paid yet? So I've issued an address. I'm waiting for payment. Have I been paid yet? And based on whether I have been paid or not, I may make an important decision, like to deliver something that I can't take back, or to pay others who are owed money as a result of that payment, or whatever. How can I make that decision if I don't know if I've been paid? So how do I answer the question, have I been paid? That's the fundamental question. There's two ways to answer that question. One is with trust, and the other one is without trust. So with trust, with trusting someone other than myself, I would go to a blockchain explorer. I could open on my browser blockstream.info or blockcipher.com or one of these other blockchain explorers. And I could have whether I've been paid. But that answer isn't authoritative. That's basically their opinion as to whether I've been paid based on their analysis of the blockchain and their operation of their software and their management of their node. And what if they're wrong? What if the information I'm seeing is wrong? What if the website I'm looking at has been compromised? It doesn't matter, but essentially, I'm not going to trust the third party. If I wanted to trust the third party, I'd just use PayPal. Instead, if I want to know if I'm paid, I ask my own Bitcoin node. I also ask my own Ethereum node. It's the same thing with any cryptocurrency. I ask the software that I have installed running the consensus rules that I think are the right consensus rules for my use case to validate transactions for me and tell me if I have been paid. And that, to me, is an authoritative answer. In fact, I have more than one node, so I can ask that question from a couple of different nodes running in a couple of different environments and get an answer that is consistent across all of them, so I know that that is a good answer. So do you need verified consent? Your income depends on it. Or altruistically, if you want to help the health of the network and you want to promote the health of the network by introducing decentralization into the network, by giving network resources in the form of copies of the blockchain that exist in different places around the world that can't easily be censored, the ability to serve other nodes, such as lightweight wallets, mobile wallets, and nodes that are booting for the first time and need copies of the blockchain, through the use of your computer resources and your hard drive and your bandwidth. You also help the network by validating and propagating transactions and blocks and enforcing the rules on a local level. So the more nodes that are participating in the network and are controlled by independent operators that choose the consensus rules they want to run, the harder it is to change the consensus rules by any one group, because their transactions and blocks will not get propagated. So for all of those reasons. Now, if you did want to run your own node in order to verify transactions and blocks, it's probably best to run that at your home rather than using a cloud provider. Cloud providers, of course, give you one less degree of control because it's not your computer and you don't control it. If you can install the software on a simple, mini PC and run it on your broadband connection at home, then that's a good idea. If you're in a third world country like the United States of America, where the political process has been compromised by telecommunications companies, and as a result, we have shit connectivity in the richest country in the world, which is why you can't hear me. In those places, you can't really run a node because your bandwidth won't be sufficient. This is a bit frustrating. I apologize. I'll see what I can do for the next MOOC session. I'm going to wait a bit, see if it gets a bit better. Isabel asks, is it true that mining pools in China control over 70% of the global hash power? And if so, does that mean there's a centralization issue? And could a proof of work change be a solution? I've answered this question a number of different ways. And to me, I think it's important to distinguish between mining pools and mining farms. We don't really know where the mining farms or the mining pools are, how much are controlled by a few actors and how much are controlled by competing factors, and whether they can actually do anything with having a majority of the hash power is questionable. We've seen in the past, of course, that having more than 50% of the hash power doesn't really result in the ability to compromise the network in a meaningful way because the incentives are not aligned across the system. But whether it's a or not is something that's debatable. But I'd like to focus a bit on the second part of the question, which is, could a proof of work change be the solution? And I've heard this being suggested a number of times, and I'd like to disabuse you of this notion because I think that would not, in fact, be the solution. For the first 10 years of Bitcoin, the development of ASICs has proceeded at a frenetic pace. until ASICs got down to about 16 nanometers of silicon fabrication. The pace of change from the initial mining that happened on CPU to GPU to FPGA to the first primitive ASICs that were done on 60 nanometer and 48 nanometer and 40 nanometer technology, finally down to 26, 24 nanometer, 20 nanometer and below. We saw enormous increases in the processing power of ASICs. An interesting phenomenon occurred during these times whereby ASICs became obsolete very, very fast. In some cases, and during the height of this period between 2013 and 2016, we saw ASICs being obsoleted as fast as 3 months, meaning that you buy a new ASIC, you run it for 3 months, and 3 months later, it's already being superseded by another ASIC that is already at least 5 to 10 times more efficient, and therefore the hash rate increase and difficulty increase wipes you out from a profitability perspective, and you have to replace the ASIC. The companies that operate in today's mining farms have become extremely adept at turning around their entire infrastructure as quickly as you can imagine. They become experts at the logistics of bringing in new ASIC equipment, racking it, and dismantling and recycling the old equipment as fast as possible. They basically learned how to change the entire industrial infrastructure of a multi-hundred-million-dollar industry every 3 months as the technology moved fast in order to maintain a cutting edge. So the miners who have the greatest success today are the ones who learned best to play the game of throwing away all of their equipment every 3 months and replacing it with brand new equipment straight from factories where they could deliver designs and fabrication as quickly as possible. Guess what happens if you change the proof of work algorithm? Who has the biggest advantage? All of the other users who are doing the one CPU, one mining, or perhaps have a home GPU, or the miners who have $1 billion in cash sitting in their bank account and also have access to the factories, the logistics, the operational skills to turn around a new ASIC on your new proof of work algorithm within 3 months. In 3 months, not only would all of the miners be back in the game with this new proof of work algorithm, they would now dominate it to a greater extent than they did before, just at the time that we're finally seeing competition. You see, something else really important happened. By 2016, we started hitting the edge of Moore's law, which means that the ASIC miners that were built in 2016 and 2017 were about at the edge of what cutting-edge silicon manufacture for commercial chips, such as the chips you see in your smartphones and your CPUs and your GPUs on your desktop machines are. Meaning that there is no more 5x improvement in performance for ASICs. ASICs now hit Moore's law. Now, Moore's law is tremendously fast compared to technological developments in other industries, but compared to the previous speed at which ASICs were being advanced, it's actually very slow. So going from 5 to 10 times increase in performance every 6 to 12 months down to in performance every 2 years, that's a very big change. It's a very big slowdown. And what that means is if you build an ASIC today, it is likely to be viable and profitable within the Bitcoin mining industry for at least 2 years, possibly 3 years, before the next generation of chips comes out at the cutting edge so that you can replace it. So the pace has finally slowed down. And what this slowdown has done is it's delivered the ability for miners to compete on a broader level, and it's beginning to diversify the mining environment. It's beginning to allow chip manufacturers to build competing chips and distribute them to users in a way where they're still profitable after 2 years. It would be catastrophic at this point in time, just when the concentration of miners are losing their primary advantage, which is the ability to turn these chips around faster. And just when there's a bit of competition to change the proof of work algorithm and hand the entire mining industry back to the dominant players who would be able to retool in 3 months with a new proof of work algorithm and then compete even more effectively with their cash reserves, be to the dominant players. No, we don't need to do a change in the proof of work algorithm, and in fact, it would be counterproductive. Ari asks, in 2008, the computational power was much lower than today. Was it anticipated by Satoshi Nakamoto that the electricity consumption would be an important factor in the mining industry? Did he foresee ASICs would have enough power to make the calculations? No, Satoshi Nakamoto didn't foresee the very rapid competitive development of mining to the point of specialized chips, giant industrial manufacturing facilities and mining facilities, and the intense competition that would drive forward that industry to the point that it has been developed today. And we know that because Satoshi Nakamoto was surprised by the development of these technologies and the rapid competition in this space. Certainly didn't predict the electricity consumption and the ASICs. Then again, Satoshi Nakamoto didn't predict the success of Bitcoin to this extent. And you've got to realize that the development of ASICs, the electricity consumption, all of these things are part of the incredible security that the cryptocurrency space has developed, especially Bitcoin. And it's one of the things that makes Bitcoin robust. Having a giant industrial security mechanism that cannot be replicated and that requires the investment of enormous energy in order to prove that you are willing to follow the rules, and the punishment that comes if you don't follow the rules, where you lose a lot of money, makes Bitcoin extremely robust to attack. So the fact that ASICs and electricity consumption developed in such a rapid way is because it is actually profitable to deliver immense security to the Bitcoin economy, because the Bitcoin economy has grown tremendously, and that security is being rewarded by users. It's really a simple development of market forces. But I don't think Satoshi Nakamoto had foreseen this. Connor asks, would it be feasible for a government agency to reverse a transaction which they suspect is nefarious? No, it wouldn't be possible for a government agency to reverse a transaction they suspect is nefarious. In fact, past a certain state, it wouldn't be possible for even miners to reverse a transaction that they either reversed by a government agency or multiple government agencies. Even if 100% of miners cooperated entirely in a transaction, if that transaction happened a few months ago or a couple of weeks ago, the number of blocks that have passed, the amount of electricity required to remine those blocks would be infeasible. Meaning that even if 100% of the miners agree to go back to a transaction, they still have to mine all of those blocks again. And the only way to mine all of those blocks again is to spend all of that electricity again, and they won't get rewarded twice. Because when they spend all of that electricity again, they will invalidate the previous reward transactions they've already done, or they will keep them, but they only got paid once. In any case, they'll spend the electricity twice, They'll only get paid once, and no miner is going to do that. So the security of Bitcoin is independent from the desire of anyone to reverse a transaction. Transactions, once they have been embedded deeply enough in the blockchain, are practically irreversible regardless of the size of the adversary. I think with that, we've covered most of the questions. James asked, has there ever been a deflationary currency experiment before, and do we need inflation? I mean, why would you buy anything if by holding you increase your purchasing power? We need inflation. How do we create that with Bitcoin? There have been deflationary economies, but you've got to realize, James, that most of the deflationary economies that are being studied by economists are ones that are facing deflation in the face of unlimited ability by the governments to print money, meaning that the deflation is not caused by a restriction in supply, but instead by a collapse in demand in the economy. So deflation is a symptom. The question is it a symptom of what? If the only economies you've studied that have deflationary characteristics are economies in that deflation is always the result, the symptom of a collapse in demand, because the supply is infinite. There's no way to stop the supply. If you have a deflating economy, what you do is you print money. We've seen this example in Japan. We're even seeing it in the United States now. So when you have deflationary tendencies like that, the government starts printing more money. So the only way it's still deflationary, even when you're printing unlimited amounts of money, you're increasing the supply, is because there's been a collapse in demand. And of course, a collapse in demand is a bad thing. But it's not the deflation that's a bad thing. It's the collapse in demand that is a bad thing. So in traditional economics, deflation is seen as an always bad thing because monetary deflation is always a result of a collapse in demand because supply is not limited in any way. Deflation in Bitcoin is a very different thing. Deflation in Bitcoin is caused by a reduction in supply, not a collapse in demand. It's caused by very robust demand meeting limited supply and technological advancement. That means that form of deflation is qualitatively very different from the deflation you see in a collapse of demand. Without a collapse in demand, deflation isn't a bad thing. Allow me to demonstrate. I currently have in front of me a computer that I purchased for about $1,500 that contains more processing power than the supercomputers of the 1980s. Many orders of magnitude more processing power. Over that time, the cost of this technology, of laptops, phones, video devices, all of these technologies that we use around us has collapsed in a deflationary collapse that is not driven by a drop in demand, but is driven by a very robust demand in an environment where technology is offering better and better and better products, where Moore's law applies, and where supply is restricted, but demand is very robust. That's a deflationary environment that's caused by a healthy market, not a deflationary environment that's caused by a recessionary or depression environment. Now, in that environment, why would I buy a laptop if my money goes much further, and if I wait 3 years, I can buy a much better laptop for the same amount of money? And then repeating that, presumably, I would never buy a laptop. I just keep the same one forever. The same thing applies to every technology out there. Why would I buy a better device when I can just keep the current one and wait 2 years and get an even better device? And we see that in technology. People don't postpone purchases like that. Instead, what they do is they use the advantage of the deflationary system. So what happens is they spend their money now, but save some for the future. and the money that they save for the future as it maintains more value vis-a-vis the laptop that they're buying or the mobile that they're buying becomes a better purchase in the future. So saving isn't necessarily the same as hoarding. And my experience with Bitcoin is, yes, I've become a better saver, and I save more since I started using Bitcoin, but I haven't stopped spending. I still spend Bitcoin on a regular basis, in fact, in order to use it as a currency, and because I work with it as a currency every day. I also earn it as a currency every day. So my hoarding instinct isn't that acute because I earn it, because I'm in the economy of cryptocurrencies in general. I'm not just buying it as an investment and burying it in cold storage. I'm earning and spending it for my business every single week. So my attitude is very different, I think, and I don't find that I'm restricted in my spending by the idea that in the future it's going to have greater value. Deflationary economies are bad because deflationary economies in currencies that have infinite supply can only happen when you have a catastrophic collapse in demand. That is not the case with cryptocurrencies, or especially Bitcoin, which has limited supply. So it's a very, very different thing. All right, I think that's covered everything. Thank you very much for participating. I apologize for the technical problems, getting a high quality as soon as possible, so that if you missed this, you can rewatch it at another time. Thank you for participating. Don't forget to ask questions during the week in the forums at the University of Nicosia, so that your questions can be incorporated into the course, but also so that you can have interesting conversations with your colleagues and other students who are attending the course, and you can learn more from each other. I'll be answering your questions next week again. This is Andreas Antonopoulos, and you've been participating in the 11th iteration of the massive open online course for the University of Nicosia. Thank you so much for participating. Have a wonderful weekend.